This is lesson 116, common denominators. So 2 or more fractions have common denominators if their denominators are equal. So in this one, if we look at 3/8 and 5/8, both of these have 8 as a denominator, so they are common denominators. Now if you look at this fraction, you have 3/8 and 5/9. 8 and 9 are not the same, they are not equal, so they are not common. So in this lesson today, we're going to use common denominators to rename a fraction whose denominators are not equal. So this is going to be kind of a long process, and you're going to make sure that you're using your best ability to pay attention because it is kind of confusing. But we're going to use multipliers and multiples to change a fraction who does not have common denominators into a fraction that does have common denominators. Okay, so we are going to start with example number 1. So rename 2/3 and 3/4 so that they have a common denominator of 12. So they're giving you a common denominator already. We're dealing with 2 fractions. The first fraction we're going to deal with is 2/3. Let me see if this helps. Okay, we're going to keep that off. We're going to have 2/3, and we need to rename that one so it has a denominator of 12. And then we have 3/4. And we need to rename that fraction so it has a common denominator of 12 as well. This goes back to the lesson that we just did on lesson 116 of renaming fractions. That's all we're doing here. We're just dealing with 2 fractions at one time to get to one common denominator. So remember that when we're renaming a fraction, we have to multiply it by a fraction name of 1, as in the numerator and the denominator are the same. So to change the denominator 2/3 to a fraction that has the denominator of 12, I have to think 3 times what number got me to 12. If we think back, I remember that 4 got me to 12. So I'm going to multiply both the top and the bottom by 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 4 is 12. Good, we got there. Next, we need to multiply 3/4 by a fraction name of 1, top and bottom are the same, to get to the denominator of 12. I know that 4 times 3 is 12, so I know that 3 times 4 is 12, so I know that 4 times 3 is 12. So I need to multiply. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 3 is 12. So I changed 2/3 to be 8/12. And I changed 3/4 into 9/12. Okay, so remember that every time that we multiply a fraction, we have to multiply it by a fraction that is equivalent to 1. Okay, so that's where this equivalent to 1 comes into play. When your numerator and your denominator are the same. All right, let's go to example number 2. Example number 2 is saying we're going to rename the fractions 1/2 and 1/3 so that they have a common denominator. So this time they didn't give you a common denominator. This time we have to find a common denominator before we can rename the fractions. The denominators are 2 and 3. Okay, so they gave us 1/2 and they also gave us 1/3. Okay, we need to rename these 2 fractions. So the denominators are 2 and 3. The product of 2 and 3 is 6. So 2 times 3 is 6. So our common denominator is going to be 6. That's like also when you think about your multiples. If I were to count by 2, I could list all my multiples of 2 until I found one that had a multiple that was equal to anything that was multiplied by 3. So I can either take 2 times 3 and multiply them to get 6, or I can go 2, 4, 6, and then I can think 3, 6. Oh, I found one that is the same on both sides. Okay, you could even go like this: 2, 4, 6, and then 3, 6. Oh, there's a common denominator. Okay, so I'm going to use that common denominator. I need to end up with a 6 at the end for both of these fractions. Okay, so I need to think about 2 times what number got me to 6? 2 times, we said 3. So my fraction needs to be 3/3 equal to 1. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 3 is 6. Same thing with down here. 3 times what number got me to 6? A 2, so 2 over 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 3 times 2 is 6. So I once again have 1/2 is equivalent to 3/6, and 1/3 is equivalent to 2/6. Okay, those are my answers. This right here. Okay, so it is a lot more steps, but it's all the things that we've already learned. Okay, let's go on to example number 3. So in examples of 1 and 2, we found common denominators of 2 fractions by multiplying the denominators. This method works for any 2 fractions. However, this method often produces a denominator larger than necessary. For example, a common denominator for 1/2 and 3/8 is 16, because you could take 2 and 8 and multiply them to get 16. But a lower common denominator is 8. So usually when we're looking for common denominators, we want to look for the least common denominator. Now I'm going to write that out. It is the least common denominator. And the short version of this is the LCD. You will hear me say this word in future lessons, and you'll hear about it in 5th grade and 6th grade. So the LCD is the least common denominator. We usually look for the least common denominator when we want to rename a fraction with common denominators. Okay, we always want those fractions to be the smallest possible form. Smaller fractions are easier to work with than larger fractions. So for example number 3, we are going to do 1/3. We want to write 1/3 and 1/6 with common denominators. Okay, so here a common denominator is going to be the product of 3 and 16. You could, or 3 and 16, sorry, 3 and 6. When you multiply 3 and 6, you get 18. But 18 is not your least common denominator, because 6, excuse me, the least common denominator is actually going to be 6, because 1/3 can be renamed as something with a 6. So actually, I'm going to try and find, I can say 3, 6, 9, and then I can go 6, 12. But then I realize, oh, 6 is smaller. I could go on, you'd get to 18 on both, but 6 is actually the smallest. So I'm going to just rename them as 6. So when I do that, I need to multiply this fraction by a fraction renamed as 1 to equal 6. 3 times what got me to 6? 3 times 2. So 2 on top, 2 on bottom. 1 times 2 is 2. 3 times 2 is 6. Now 1/6 is already in a denominator form of 6. So I'm just going to multiply by 1 to get 1/6. Okay, so 2/6 and 1/6 are our fractions. Okay, least common denominator. Remember that it has to be the smallest form to get your least common denominator. Even though I could have taken 3 and 6 and multiplied them together to get 18, 18 would have been a way bigger number, and we would have had bigger fractions with the name of 1 here. So we just decided to use 6, which is our least common denominator. Okay, we'll hit this harder later on, but I wanted to start out letting you know that least common denominator, or you will see LCD, you always want to have your least common denominator. Okay, now, lesson practice. You have A through F to do. They are kind of going to use a lot of space, so please try your best. I will do letter A with you, just so that we can get one more practice in, because I know it can kind of be confusing. And then you're going to do the rest on your own. Make sure that you read the instructions, because letters A and B kind of want you to use any common denominator, not any, but you have to have a common denominator that ends in a 10. The other C through F, it actually wants you to use the least common denominator. So don't just multiply your 2 to get the number. Try to find the smallest number that they have in common. So for letter A, it says rename 1/2 and 1/5 so that they have a common denominator of 10. Okay, you want your denominator to be 10 for both. So 2 times what number gets me to 10? Well, I know 2 times 5, so 5 over 5. 1 times 5 is 5, 5 tenths. 1/5, I'm going to say 5 times what number gets me to 10? 2, so 2 over 2. 1 times 2 is 2. So I have 5 tenths and 2 tenths. You can say just these, circle them, and I will see your work. Please, please, please show me your work. That way I can always go backwards and see what you may have done wrong. It's a lot simpler than just trying to figure out what you did wrong. I'd rather see the work on paper. That way I can find the mistake. So go ahead and finish B through F on your own. Take a picture of your lesson practice and get it uploaded to Seesaw. If you have any questions, please feel free to Zoom with me if you need any help. Okay? All right. Good luck, fourth graders.